wrapped her identity around someone else's opinion. Start with her, God, and teach her to build. When you build yourself, you develop discernment. You stop falling for potential and start recognizing patterns. A woman who's building herself doesn't just look at chemistry, she looks at character. She's not impressed by a man's words if his life doesn't match them. You can't fool a woman who's been built on truth. She's done the inner work. She's sat with her pain. She's cried her tears and dried them with purpose. She's not afraid of loneliness because she found peace in solitude. You can tell when a woman has built herself. She walks in a room like she belongs there, even if she doesn't say a word. She's not competing. She's not comparing. She's not thirsty for validation. She knows that her presence is a gift and her boundaries are a form of worship. Doesn't shrink to make others found. She's found in Christ, found in grace, found in her calling. She wakes up and chooses herself, not because she's selfish, but because she knows the cost of self-abandonment. She's not trying to complete someone or be completed by someone. She's already whole. A relationship is a bonus, not a bandage. A blessing, not a lifeline. And if it doesn't add to her peace, her vision, her values, then it's not worth her time. Sis, I need you to stop waiting for a relationship to validate your readiness. You don't need someone to want you in order to believe that you're worthy. You're worthy because God said so. You're worthy because you're still here, still breathing, still rising after everything you've been through. That's not accidental. That's divine. That's purpose. That's proof. So build your faith, build your character. Knows how to dress distraction up real pretty. He'll send someone to say all the right things at all the right times, and it feels good for a moment. Like maybe you're finally seen, finally chosen, but that kind of validation is temporary. It fades fast. It fades when he doesn't call you back. It fades when the arguments start. It fades when his words stop matching his actions. And suddenly you're back at square one, wondering what's wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with you. You just tried to fill a spiritual need with an emotional fix. God didn't design you to find your identity in another human being. He created you to find it in him. And the purpose he placed inside of you before you were even formed in your mother's womb. That's not poetry, that's scripture. Jeremiah 1:5 says, before I formed you in the womb, comfortable. She doesn't perform to feel valuable. She is rooted. She is solid. She is built. And building doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you don't still have struggles or moments of weakness. What it means is that you've chosen growth over fantasy. You've chosen discipline over distraction. You've chosen healing over hiding. That's what worth looks like. It looks like work. Quiet, intentional, often lonely work. Its work will outlast anything built on desperation. See, a boyfriend can't be your builder. That's not his job. That's your job and God's job. When you place that weight on a man, you start expecting him to save you, fix you, fill you. And then you start confusing codependency with commitment. That's how you lose yourself in someone else. But a woman who knows her worth never gets lost because she's already would fix your brokenness. But broken love can't build a whole woman. That's why when you know your worth, you understand the assignment. Build you first. Let's be honest. Some of us weren't taught how to build ourselves. We were taught how to attract someone, how to dress pretty, act humble, stay agreeable, be wifey material. And don't get me wrong, those things are bad in themselves. But when all your effort is external, you end up neglecting the internal. And that's where the real work is. That's where the healing lives. That's where the fire gets lit. So before you bind yourself to anyone, before you give someone access to your body, your time, your energy, you better know who you are without them. A woman who knows her worth builds emotional strength. She learns how to be alone without feeling empty. There is power in being alone and still feeling full, not full of distractions, not full of noise, but full of. Build your voice, build your boundaries, build your joy, build your wisdom. Because when the right one does come along, you won't be scrambling to become someone. You'll already be someone. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who's already built Della Vicky from a man will never satisfy the void only purpose can fill. That ache in your soul, that silent longing that wakes you up in the middle of the night wondering why, despite all the compliments, all the dates, all the attention, you still feel like something's missing. That's not loneliness, that's not heartbreak, that's a lack of purpose. You're not love starved, you're purpose starved. And no matter how many good mornings he texts you, or how many likes you get, if you're not walking in the fullness of why God created you, you'll still feel empty. See, the enemy, vision, full of truth, full of identity. You don't build that by waiting for someone to tell you you're beautiful. You build it by believing God when he says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. That Psalm 139 says, not someone's late night text. Some of us keep binding ourselves prematurely. You know why? Because we're afraid of doing the hard work of building. We'd rather build with someone, even if that someone isn't stable, than build alone with God. But I came to tell you, God doesn't need your boyfriend's permission to grow you. He's not going to wait for you to be in a relationship before he starts healing you, delivering you, and setting you free. He's looking for a woman who says, Lord, start with me. Start with the woman who keeps doubting her reflection. Start with the woman who compares herself to everyone on social media. Start with the woman who gave too much too fast and now feels used. Start with the woman. A woman who knows her worth builds herself before she binds herself. That means she chooses wholeness over desperation. She doesn't sit around waiting to be picked like she's on some emotional clearance rack. She knows that love is not a rescue mission. Sis, let me tell you something. If you wait to build yourself until someone loves you, you'll end up attaching your growth to their approval. And what happens when they leave? What happens when they don't show up like they promised? You're left rebuilding from rubble you never needed to sit in. Building yourself is sacred. It's spiritual. It's you and God going to work, chiseling away the lies that were spoken over you, healing the parts of you that were told you weren't enough, reconstructing the identity you gave away because you thought someone else's love. Ladies, can we talk real for a moment? I'm not here today to sugarcoat or smooth things over. I came with a word for the woman who's tired of measuring her worth by someone else's attention. I came for the sister who's been asking, why am I not enough for him to stay? When sis, the real question is, why am I trying to convince someone to recognize what God already confirmed? See, this sermon isn't about men. It's not about dating. It's about worth. Your worth. A woman who knows her worth doesn't beg to be loved, doesn't chase empty promises, and doesn't tie her identity to a relationship status. She walks with the confidence of heaven because she knows who she is and who she is. So today we're going to expose the lies, break the cycles, and awaken the woman in you who never needed a boyfriend to feel complete. Let's go. Knew you before you were born. I set you apart. Set apart means you were never meant to blend in, never meant to be defined by culture's standards of beauty or worth, never meant to chase approval from someone who hasn't even discovered their own. But we get tired. Now wait. Tired of waiting. Tired of being single, tired of scrolling through engagement posts and feeling like God forgot about us. So we settle for crumbs of affection when God called us to the table. We settle for half love from half healed people. And in the process, we start shrinking, dimming our light, adjusting who we are to stay likable, because deep down we think maybe if I'm more quiet, more easygoing, more forgiving, he'll choose me. But sis, if you have to earn love by becoming less of yourself, it's not love. It's performance. And performance is exhausting. You don't need a man to validate what God already declared over your life. You don't need someone to post you on Instagram to feel seen. You don't need someone to call you bae to feel wanted. You are already validated by the cross, by the calling, by the evidence of breath still in your lungs. That breath is proof that your assignment is still active. So why are you chasing people who aren't even called to your mission? Because when you know your purpose, you become hard to manipulate. You don't fall for shallow compliments when you've got deep confidence. You don't confuse attraction for alignment. You start asking better questions. Instead of, does he like me? You ask, does he match the vision God gave me? Instead of, is he cute? You ask, can he handle the weight of where I'm going? That's purpose-driven discernment. And when you lead with purpose, the right people can't help but recognize your value because you radiate from within. But purpose requires presence. You've got to be present with yourself before you can discover what you're called to. You've got to sit in the quiet, turn off the noise, stop checking who viewed your story, stop needing constant feedback just to feel okay. Start asking God, what did you place inside of me? What am I carrying that I've been ignoring because I was too distracted by who didn't text me back? Because that thing inside you, that gift, that calling, that anointing is so much bigger than your relationship status. Let's go deeper. Sometimes the need for male validation is actually a symptom of unresolved trauma. Somewhere in your past, someone made you feel unworthy. Maybe it was a father who never affirmed you, a boyfriend who rejected you, a friendship that betrayed you. And now that little girl inside of you is still searching for someone to say, you're enough. But I need you to know that voice is lying to you. It's telling you that your healing is tied to being wanted. But healing doesn't happen through someone wanting you. Healing happens through you choosing you. You choosing to forgive, to release, to stop chasing ghosts of the past and start standing in the woman you're becoming. Purpose brings clarity. When you know what you're called to do, you stop entertaining what doesn't align. You stop giving energy to people who only see you as a temporary distraction instead of a permanent partner. You don't let someone play with your heart just because you're afraid of being alone. You become so wrapped up in your assignment that you don't even have time for foolishness. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. You're not too good. You're just too called. Validation is addictive because it feels like love, but it's not. Real love doesn't come from desperation. It comes from overflow. It comes from you knowing your worth and someone else recognizing it, not because you begged, but because you built. When you're operating in your purpose, your whole energy changes. You glow different, you walk different, you speak different. You attract people who are drawn to your spirit, not just your selfie. Let's talk truth. Some of us have been so focused on getting chosen that we've neglected our assignment. We've paused our growth, muted our voice, abandoned our dreams, all because we were too busy obsessing over whether he'd stay. Sis, don't you dare let a man become your mission when God already gave you one. Don't you dare delay your destiny because you're trying to get picked. You are not a backup plan. You are not a second option. You are not disposable. You are chosen, not by him, by him. And chosen women don't chase. They move. They move in purpose. They move in confidence. They move in truth. And they don't wait for someone to see their worth. They walk in it. Even when it's lonely. Even when it's hard. Even when the enemy whispers you're behind. Because purpose keeps you grounded. Purpose gives you vision. Purpose reminds you you were created for more than just being someone's girlfriend. Let's be clear. Relationships are beautiful when they're built on the right foundation, but they're toxic when they're built on insecurity. If your entire identity collapses every time someone pulls away, that's not love. That's a soul wound. And the only way to heal that wound is not through attention, but through alignment. Align with what God says. Align with who he called you to be. Align with the process, even when it's painful. Because when you finally stand tall in your purpose, you'll realize you never needed him to validate you. You needed you to believe in you. And the moment you believe in yourself, not just on the outside, but deep in your spirit, everything starts to shift. You stop settling. You stop doubting. You stop apologizing for being too much. You stop tolerating disrespect disguised as romance, and you start rising. Rising into your voice, rising into your worth, rising into your purpose, because validation fades, but purpose sustains. Validation flatters, but purpose fulfills. Validation feels good, but purpose is good. Emotional dependency is not love, it's a warning sign. See, a lot of us confuse being emotionally entangled with being emotionally connected. But sis, there's a difference between bonding and binding. Real love builds you, but emotional dependency binds you. It drains you, controls you, and keeps you locked in cycles that look like love but feel like prison. And when your emotional well-being hinges on how someone else treats you, calls you, texts you, responds to you, that's not partnership. That's captivity. Let's get honest. Sometimes we're not in love. We're just afraid of being alone. And so we cling to the first person who shows us attention, hoping that they'll be the answer to our emptiness. But if their presence is the only thing that keeps you stable, then their absence will be the thing that destroys you. That's not love. That's emotional dependency. And it's dangerous, not just to your heart, but to your identity. Because when someone becomes your emotional oxygen, you'll do anything just to keep them breathing in your direction. You'll compromise your standards. You'll silence your voice. You'll accept behavior you swore you never would, all because you're afraid that without them, you'll fall apart. But God didn't create you to be dependent on man. He created you to be anchored in him. His word says in Psalm 62:5, yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him, not from him, the boyfriend, the situationship, the maybes and the mixed signals, but from him. And when your soul finds rest in God, you stop needing someone else to be your peace. You start bringing peace to the table. You stop needing someone to rescue you from your sadness. You start healing from the inside out. Emotional dependency sneaks in when you're not paying attention. It whispers to you in the form of, I can't live without him, and if he leaves, I'll be lost. It makes you forget who you were before he came along. It makes you ignore the red flags. And then one day you wake up and realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You've given so much emotionally that you have nothing left for you. You're exhausted. You're anxious. You're addicted to the highs and lows, the good days and bad days. You mistake chaos for passion. But that's not passion. That's instability. And God never intended for love to feel like confusion. Let's go deeper. Some of us were never taught how to be emotionally whole on our own. We learned to survive by attaching ourselves to people. We learned that if we loved hard enough, maybe they'd stay. If we gave enough, maybe they'd finally treat us right. But emotional dependency is a form of self-abandonment. You stop showing up for yourself because you're too busy showing up for someone who never asked you to lose yourself in the first place. And that's where the enemy plays you. He convinces you that if you just do more, love harder, wait longer, then maybe, just maybe, they'll finally love you the way you need. But the problem isn't your effort. The problem is the dependency. Love doesn't demand your sanity. Love doesn't manipulate your emotions. Love doesn't have you checking your phone 100 times a day, wondering if they're going to ghost you or gaslight you. Love doesn't have you competing with their past, begging for reassurance, or constantly second guessing where you stand. That's not love. That's instability wrapped in emotional chaos. And the moment you stop calling it love is the moment you start walking toward healing. Sis, I need you to understand this. Your emotions are not the enemy. God gave you emotions. They are indicators, not dictators. They show you where you are, but they should never control where you go. Emotional dependency happens when your feelings lead and your faith follows. But that's backward. You got to let your faith lead. Faith in who God says you are. Faith in the future he's prepared. Faith in the fact that peace is possible without emotional chaos. Sometimes we call it loyalty, but it's really fear. We stay in toxic connections, not because we're deeply in love, but because we're deeply afraid. Afraid of starting over. afraid of being single, afraid that maybe this is the best we can do. But God doesn't call you to settle. He calls you to wholeness. And you can't be whole when your emotional state depends on someone who doesn't even know how to be consistent. Your truth because you don't want to upset them. Sometimes it's feeling a pit in your stomach when they take too long to respond and calling it butterflies when it's actually anxiety. Emotional dependency doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just quietly suffocates you. You've got to take your power back, reclaim your voice, rebuild your self-worth, because emotional dependency doesn't just hurt, it delays destiny. It keeps you so busy trying to maintain someone else's comfort that you neglect your own calling. You can't run after purpose with your heart tied to instability. You can't pour into others when you're constantly being emotionally emptied by someone who doesn't pour back. That's not a relationship, that's a transaction. And God didn't call you to be a vending machine for someone else's needs. He called you to be a woman of worth, of vision, of strength. You were created to feel deeply, yes, but not to lose yourself in your feelings. There's a version of you that exists beyond needing someone to tell you you're enough. There's a version of you that wakes up, feels peace, walks in purpose, and doesn't question her value just because someone else doesn't see it. That version is already in you. She just needs you to choose her over the fear of being alone. Alone doesn't mean abandoned. Alone doesn't mean unlovable. Alone means available. Available to grow, to heal, to hear God clearly, to learn who you are when nobody else is influencing your every move. That's where real strength is built. In the quiet, in the space between the heartbreak and the breakthrough. That's where your emotional independence is born, not from ignoring your feelings, but from healing them. Some of us were never shown what secure love looks like, so we confuse chaos with passion. But the love God has for you, it's steady, it's safe, it's peace, it's I'll never leave you nor forsake you. It's not based on performance. You don't have to earn it. You just have to receive it. And once you receive that love, that deep, grounding, everlasting love, you stop depending on people to fill a place that only God can occupy. That's when the healing begins. When you recognize that emotional dependency is not your identity. You are not needy, you're just in need of the right source. And when that source becomes your foundation, you can love from a place of fullness, not emptiness, from a place of power, not panic, from a place of clarity, not confusion. That's what love is supposed to look like. When you know your value, you stop auditioning for someone else's acceptance. You stop walking into rooms like you're trying to earn your place. You stop shrinking yourself, editing yourself, apologizing for yourself, because you finally understand that you were never created to be a candidate. You are the chosen. You are the called. You are the woman God set apart before time began. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that you had to prove yourself to be worthy of love. And so you audition for affection, for attention, for commitment, hoping someone would look at you and finally say, you're enough. But let me tell you something. The moment you know your value, the audition is over. You're not a contestant in somebody's love competition. You're not here to be compared, picked apart, or judged based on your performance. You are already qualified, already anointed, already worthy. And anyone who makes you feel like you have to perform for their love is not someone who understands what love truly is. It starts young, doesn't it? That feeling of needing to earn your worth. Maybe it was in your childhood, trying to be the perfect daughter, the quiet one, the helpful one, the good one. Maybe you learned that your value was attached to how easy you were to deal with. So you smiled when you were hurting, you stayed when you wanted to leave, you gave when you were empty. And somewhere in all that, you became a woman who could say no, a woman who always said yes, a woman who became addicted to approval. Not because you didn't have value, but because nobody ever told you that your value was intrinsic. So now when someone shows a little interest, you try to earn it. You overthink every text. You worry if you're too much or not enough. You twist yourself into shapes God never made you to fit, all to be accepted by someone who doesn't even know how to accept themselves. But sis, that is not your assignment. You were not created to audition. You were created to be bold, to be whole, to be the woman who walks into a room like she's already owned it, because heaven already declared her identity before the foundation of the world. And when you know your value, rejection doesn't destroy you, it informs you. You don't see it as a reflection of your worth. You see it as a redirection towards your destiny, because you're no longer trying to prove that you're lovable. You already know you are. That knowledge changes everything. It changes who you choose. It changes what you tolerate. It changes how you carry yourself. You're not sitting around waiting for someone to crown you, because you already know your royalty. Let's talk about the root of this need to audition. For many women, it's trauma. Somewhere along the way, someone taught you that love had to be earned. Maybe it was a father who was present but emotionally unavailable. Maybe it was a first love who made you feel disposable. Maybe it was years of being passed over, overlooked, underappreciated. And now your heart carries that unspoken belief: I have to prove I'm enough to be kept. But I came to tell you, you're already enough. You've always been enough. The real healing happens when you stop trying to get people to validate you and start believing what God already said about you. Because when God speaks over you, it's final. His word doesn't need confirmation from a man who can't see your value. And the more you seek your identity through people who don't carry your future, the more, let me speak to the woman who's been caught in the cycle. The one who knows this isn't healthy but doesn't know how to let go. I see you. I know what it's like to need someone so badly that the idea of walking away feels like death. But let me tell you, sometimes death is the beginning of resurrection. Sometimes you have to let the relationship die so the real you can come back to life. You've buried yourself under their moods, their issues, their choices. And now God is calling you to rise, to get up, to stop making emotional comfort your God. Because comfort will lie to you. It will keep you stuck. But healing will set you free. And don't think emotional dependency always looks dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's texting back fast because you're scared they'll think you're not interested. Sometimes it's holding back. To you, before you were born, I set you apart. Set apart means you were never meant to blend in, never meant to be defined by culture's standards of beauty or worth, never meant to chase approval from someone who hasn't even discovered their own. But we get tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of being single, tired of scrolling through engagement posts and feeling like God forgot about us. So we settle for crumbs of affection when God called us to the table. We settle for half love from half healed people. And in the process, we start shrinking, dimming our light, adjusting who we are to stay likable, because deep down we think maybe if I'm more quiet, more easygoing, more forgiving, he'll choose me. But sis, if you have to earn love by becoming less of yourself, it's not love. It's performance. And performance is exhausting. You don't need a man to validate what God already declared over your life. You don't need someone taught you that love had to be earned. Maybe it was a father who was present but emotionally unavailable. Maybe it was a first love who made you feel disposable. Maybe it was years of being passed over, overlooked, underappreciated. And now your heart carries that unspoken belief: I have to prove I'm enough to be kept. But I came to tell you, you're already enough. You've always been enough. The real healing happens when you stop trying to get people to validate you and start believing what God already said about you. Because when God speaks over you, it's final. His word doesn't need confirmation from a man who can't see your value. And the more you seek your identity through people who don't carry your future, the more